G'day, I'm Nick Clements from YourQS and welcome to our podcast Beyond the Guesstimate, where I explore the concept of cost-informing design. I've been involved in the construction sector since 1993, and pretty much that whole time I've been frustrated about the inefficiency of it. And really it's the ethos of our business is looking to try and find better ways of doing things. And it's not just the construction side of it that I'm interested in, but also the business side, because all of us in construction generally are involved in a business. So if you don't have an efficient business, you can't be an efficient construction person. There's this Chinese saying that, may you live in interesting times. And yeah, since 2020, we've been in interesting times, haven't we? And yeah, I think it could well be a curse, whether it's Chinese or not, but it's definitely a curse. If you look at what we've had to go through over the last sort of 6 or 7 years, we've had COVID. Then we had the construction boom after COVID. They had to deal with that. Then we had the Reserve Bank compressing things down again. So we had the sort of downturn in construction, then the Ukraine war, and now we got Trump's war, and lingering in the background is AI. So it's pretty hard as a business person and somebody operating in the industry to know just how to deal with this. This really is, every time it seems to be another unprecedented thing that we've got to try and work through. So today we're going to explore a little bit around the business side of things and just understanding uncertainty and just what are sort of some of the basic business principles you need to have in place to be able to work your way through it, because nobody's got one answer that you do this and it's going to fix things. So we've got to work through a process for sort of how you come up with it. For me, there's a couple of key fundamentals that you need to have in place. So one is a support network. For me, I'm involved in something called BNI, Business Networking International, which is a group of businesses where we get together every week and we talk about our businesses. And the main thing is sort of, in theory, is we're looking for opportunities for the businesses that we're involved with. But for me, I find it a really useful support structure, because as a business owner, it can be quite lonely, and the challenges you're facing within your business, I own the business. I'm the only one that's facing the challenges that I'm facing within my business. But when I'm in with my network, there's a whole lot of other guys that are going through similar things, so we're able to share that support structure. So that's an important part for me. I've also got a business advisor that works with me and has been with me for a few years, and so having that support structure is an important part of it. The other thing that I think you've got to have in place, and particularly in these times, is a good time to look at it, is a business strategy, is understanding what you're looking to try and achieve with your business. And for me, a business strategy comes down to understanding where you are now and understanding where you want to get to, and then knowing, what is it I've got to do differently to get from where I am now to where I want to get to. Just keeping doing what you're doing isn't, you're going to stay where you are now. So you've got to be doing something different, and you've got to have a plan for doing it. So I think that's an important part of having a strategy. And in these challenging times, I think you want to be clear around what your strategy is. And whether you're looking at it, you're probably not looking at it every day or even every month, but having a pretty solid idea in your mind about what you need to be doing to achieve the outcomes that you want to achieve. So today we've got a business advisor, Chris Stafford-Bush, who's going to join us, and he's part of my BNI chapter. So I've known him for a little while, and a few months ago, he handed out a business health check. So what we're actually going to do today is we're going to go through that business health check, which hits on 10 points of things that you need to be thinking about within your business. So that's going to be the main focus of our chat today. But we'll start off by just getting to know Chris a bit and sort of learning a bit about how you got into being a business advisor. So I guess start off with, what did you study?
I studied commerce, Bachelor of Commerce at Auckland University, majoring in finance, accounting and marketing. So long time ago, and things have changed dramatically since then. Just to reiterate a point that you'd made before, but absolutely agree with you around a plan. Where am I now? Where am I going to? The most important thing is having clarity. The clarity from doing a degree many, many years ago and now has come somewhat changed, but definitely the backbone of studying helped.
So you did a finance degree. What was your first step into the real world of having a job?
Look, Nick, I ended up by working for a manufacturing company called Carrier Zone Pack. Probably not so well known now. In the old days, they used to make chillers for large buildings and commercial buildings in Auckland.
They were, I remember them. Yeah. They were in Tidal Road in Mangere.
Yeah, look, we were in Great South Road for a while there. I was a cost accountant there, and I guess bringing back to any costing, it's fundamental to a business. It's got to be accurate. You've got to understand your margins. And I guess that was one of my first learnings at Carrier Zone Pack as a cost accountant.
So how much influence do you think that first job you had out of university had on your career and sort of where you've headed and what sort of things you've got into?
Yeah, look, I think moved a long way since then. And I guess understanding that just the costing side, important in any business, understanding, volume, actual costs, direct costs, and making sure that you really understood how you were progressing. It was fundamental at that time. Costing, I've used many, many times owning a manufacturing business later on, and therefore it was pretty fundamental, although after a year and a half there, I really couldn't wait to get out of there.
And where did you go to after that?
Look, at the time...
Not that we'll go through every step of your career.
No, but I mean, look at the time, and it's interesting, the company that I worked for at that time is no longer in business and was a very large construction developer in the 80s, a company called Chase Corporation.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so I worked there as an accountant for many, many years. And look, I think had the opportunity to help with the wind down of that company. And I guess I learnt more probably when it was being wound down and some of the mistakes were made than when it was, flying share prices and later on wallpapering toilets with it type of thing. But incredibly...
They were one of the darlings of the 87,
yes.
Well, a pre-87 boom, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
And they were one of the ones that failed in the crash afterwards, weren't they?
Yeah, it failed in New Zealand, and then the business kept operating in Australia for a while. I was working out of Sydney at that stage, and then we came back to help with some of the winding up. But I learnt a lot, and that was particularly around capital and control and what that meant, and therefore the right time to probably bring in new equity and to share the burden to ensure that the business could continue. Ultimately, it didn't.
So what sort of mistakes? What sort of jumps out at you as mistakes that they made?
Look, I think, I better be careful not using names at the time because I guess there are interesting conversations at board meetings around, I think, the control and process was set in place, and when that was constantly broken, it went to raise problems further down the track.
So when you say control and process, what?
Look, I mean, pre-leasing before you push the button, and developing quickly.
So they were building buildings to rent?
They were largely commercial office blocks,
right.
But the business was fairly varied. I mean, it had a funeral business, and it had a paint business, and had a variety of different trading businesses as well. Fundamentally, it was a developer, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So these controls are around the decision-making processes to when you push the button on the project.
Absolutely, yeah. So, look, I think that applies to any business, and that was a learning going forward anyway, that you have a process, you stick to the process. You can always change things slightly, but the fact is the process is there for a reason. And I think in any business, if you've got a process, you kind of stick to it.
Yeah. No, I absolutely get that. So, I started YourQS in 2017, and it took about 18 months and quite a lot of that to get it to the point where we could actually bring it to market. So, sort of go from a business idea to something that we could sell. Yeah. Took that sort of time, and a big chunk of that was just figuring out systems and processes. And I guess you talk about costing, and that's what we do.
Fundamental, yeah.
And it's absolutely fundamental to any building project, is making sure you've got a good understanding of what the costs are at the beginning. So particularly, if you're a builder doing a fixed price with a client, then you're crazy if you don't have a good understanding of the cost. But even from a design or architecture point of view and a client point of view, just having an appreciation for what that design is going to cost and does it fit with the client's budget. I guess my whole world, and really in a lot of ways, just revolves around understanding numbers and understanding costs.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, previous conversation with you around capturing that as early as possible, so you understand ultimately what the cost of the design is going to be, rather than getting all the way through to completing detailed design and then realising that it's twice as much as what the client was prepared to pay or what the brief was.
Yeah, which is still pretty common. Yeah, we still get that a lot.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, the two scary ones are that where we get a building consent set of plans and we cost it, and it's double what the client was expecting it to be. So that's a bad one. And then the other bad one we get is, the builder's 80% of the way through the project and 100% of the way through the money. So basically, we want to try and avoid both of those scenarios as much as we possibly can.
I think they run through that every grand design program, don't they?
They always seem to have another bucket of money somewhere they can pull out, don't they? Those grand design ones. Yeah. And they frustrate me. Why didn't you involve a QS at the beginning? But then if they did that, the program wouldn't be that interesting.
No, look, I think that's half of it, isn't it? To add that excitement and drama. Yeah.
If it went through and sort of everything was on track all the way through, and yes, you told us that was going to happen. So
wouldn't make great TV.
No, exactly. Yeah. So the Chase thing, so that would have wound up in the, I guess, late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, late 80s. And then I went to Europe in late 89, actually, and stayed there for quite some time. Got involved in a variety of different businesses there, which taught me a whole lot of other things.
Did you notice anything sort of jump out as to being different between doing business in New Zealand New Zealand Aussie versus Europe?
Look, I think not really, but the compliance was in many ways higher. I worked initially for a company that operated throughout the world, but very large business in Europe, and I was a European financial controller. We had a team that worked constantly just on transfer pricing to minimize tax between the countries. So it was calculating, how could we legitimately have IP calculated and transfer those costs back to head office costs, back to each of the regions to ensure that that was fair and equitable. Sometimes,
so you defend it anyway.
But effectively, it was really a tax strategy as well. That was a great business, and in terms of understanding continuity, it was a business that they call themselves collectibles, but effectively, you buy one and there's 10 in the range, and so you keep the continuity every month. Your credit card's dinged, and you get so very brilliant for planning from a cash flow standpoint, because you always had up to 2 years forecast of cash flow.
So if you knew there was 10 in the collection, they'd release 3, and you could project out.
And you never got the holder of whatever you're buying until you finish buying the 10. But wonderful business model. And I think going through that was another thing that taught me from a financial and business standpoint was around the importance of continuity. Not everything's a subscription model, but having that continuity allows you to plan better. You don't run a business that goes up and down relying on one-off transactions. So, look, it's a wonderful business model.
Yeah, I can understand. So we're very much project driven. We're working on a couple of ideas. We discussed about this problem with architects understanding costs. So we're working on something that we're going to be looking to release later this year, which I think will be a subscription model. Whereas for us at the moment, it's very much project by project. So our workload does go up and down with what's going on in the market. So I'm looking forward to having some continuity in mind.
Hey, look, I think it makes sense for businesses that have got great IP, and people subscribing to have access to that IP and use it regularly is a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, and it's sort of also the cost of creating and maintaining that IP is pretty high.
Yes.
And if you can sort of amortize that across a whole bunch of people and everybody's paying a little bit, then you're effectively getting the benefit of this massive investment, but you're only paying a small amount for it. So I think the fundamental principles behind that sort of thing are actually pretty good for everybody if you can make it work.
Sure, so, and look, as I know, as you know, and I'm sure you've got to keep developing. So no matter what, it's not, I've got to stop there. Technology's changing, and you've got to keep developing, and it's a high cost that you've got to keep amortizing across more and more customers.
So to look at a couple of, I know you've owned a few different businesses in the construction sector. So I guess maybe talk about what was the first one of those that you got into?
The first one of those was a manufacturing business. So that was in the early 2000s. We were actually initially manufacturing for the retail industry. So the continuity model there was trying to get more chains, because chains like a Farmers, a Hallensteins, a Whitcoulls, all these companies were always having something in the pipeline. And at that particular time, you had a lot of department type development going on, 277 before that and the like. And therefore, there's always something planning. So we were manufacturing fixtures and fittings.
Right.
And then we started manufacturing. At that time, opportunity arose because the cross rate with Australia was around, I think, 76. So we had a cost advantage against manufacturing in Australia. So we started manufacturing and exporting, doing casinos, hotels, very high-end restaurants, and duty-free.
So this was like shop fittings or furniture?
Shop fittings, furnishing, main timber steel, but quite high. Most of it was relatively high end. Yeah, because you couldn't compete with China. So the steel basic fabricated ones are all coming from China.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so how did you find that varied with sort of the pure manufacturing businesses versus something that's, you're obviously manufacturing a product, but then I guess you were involved with installing and supplying to people installing.
Yeah,
so what were
true.
the different dynamics with that sort of from the construction sector element?
I mean, initially we were only manufacturing, and then we would subcontract our project management and our installation. Subsequently, we realised it would be better to control our own destiny and have our own installers doing the project on site, and very time driven in retail. So you had guys working at night time to make sure you're delivering on time. So that was just also a bit of vertical integration, making sure we're going up the food chain, down the food chain where we can. Tough business, but had great times there. Coming back to the basics of costing, I mean, that was just absolutely critical. To make sure we understood our costs. We spent quite a lot of money on having a very strong integrated operating platform, so that basically from woe to go we were working on one platform.
So that's in terms of a software system? Software
system is called Inventory Pro, and we basically, quoting bills of material, actuals flowing in, automated timesheets on the shop floor. Any point in time you could look at where you were versus your initial bill of materials and time frame, et cetera, et cetera. So it was very easy to monitor and manage whether you're achieving your original costs, as I'm sure you know from what you're doing.
It's actually, yes, it's one of our challenges is we get involved in the estimating bit of it. And my previous business, so we had a software business before, and we built an end-to-end system like what you're talking about, with identifying that the problem of understanding what actually happened versus what we thought was going to happen really is the key to getting accurate estimates. So if you can get that closed loop. And so we actually built an end-to-end system, but it's an entire another podcast series.
But real-time costs was just invaluable.
And so we rely on just getting feedback from our builders that we work with, and just trying, and a lot of it's anecdotal, just trying to, if we've had an issue somewhere, what could we do differently? So we've got one at the moment where there's a project we did in Whangarei, and the guy's saying, the hours have come in a lot higher. So he's been really good. He's actually got a really good record of where the hours have gone. So we're going to spend some time unpicking that and just seeing, was there anything we could have identified differently to more accurately estimate them? So it's great that if you're able to have a closed system and do it all in one system is the ideal.
And for that type of business, I mean, the fundamental things are if there's a variance, either you priced poorly, you were inefficient, or something,
the job wasn't managed well.
So
or variations or scope changed and it wasn't captured.
Absolutely.
That's definitely one of the challenges. So and a lot of it comes down to having those systems, because if you don't have a good estimate to start with, and then systems to capture what's happening during the project, then the best you've got is a number at the end of it to say this is what happened. You don't necessarily know why. So being able to monitor it and track it through is, now it doesn't really matter what sort of business you're doing. That's really
it's again fundamental, and I guess be surprised the number of SMEs that don't. And therefore you come unstuck because you really don't know.
I'm not surprised, because it's actually not that easy to do, and it does. It does take some effort to get it in place, and once you've got it in place, it's there's some ongoing effort. There's certainly a lot of work to get it going, but once you've got it going, it becomes manageable. But
process.
It's in a lot of ways, if life's going all right, it's easier not to do it at all. It's just when things start going bad, that's when you regret not having done the work.
Exactly. And seen that before. But look, I mean, the manufacturing was interesting. I guess, having been in a bit of manufacturing from a cost accounting time earlier on, that helped in terms of making sure there was accuracy. But of course, looking holistically at the business now or at that time, there are a whole lot of other elements which we could sort of cover in the health check.
And it's interesting that I've always viewed that construction is actually a manufacturing business. It's just the manufacturing site varies on every project, and what you're building varies in every project. But you actually look at the fundamental processes as to what's going on. It's a manufacturing business. It's just
I completely agree, but I've never heard anyone say that for you. The first, Nick. Well done.
Thanks, Chris.
If only people looked at it like that.
and so, it's certainly, I guess, it's probably my engineering background coming through that. And it's something I actually got some training on it when I was at Carter Holt Harvey around viewing things as a process, and it's something I came to realise that everything in life is a process, and if you can see the process as the first thing, and then understand it, and then figure out how you can influence it is the key. And so I've tried to apply that in what we do in our business, and so not only how we run our business, but how we provide our service to our clients is all based around that, to try and make it repeatable. Because if you can make it repeatable, then you can adjust. If it's a machine going chomp chomp chomp, if the machine's repeatable, well, you tweak this, it does that. Whereas if it's not repeatable, you change that, it might do this. So it's all about getting that process and
sure. And look, the one thing that is repeatable is the process. Generally speaking, And
then you throw people at it.
It throws things into an unusual thing. But I mean, people are involved in every process, and it's a very hard one to estimate, as I'm sure from what you're doing. I mean, every site's different. It's got its idiosyncrasies, and therefore the labour side of things can be quite problematic, or at least complicated.
And the efficiency and the dynamics of the team doing the work. And in the building sector, we've done some analysis on it, that about 60% of the total cost of the house is labour. So whether it's carpentry labour, or the plumber, or the painter, or the window fabricator, people just have such a big impact on it. And every time when there's a person involved, you've immediately got a degree of variability. And so it's a matter of, I guess we talking about probabilities and trying to get it within a band, so that you're never going to be right, because there's always the extremes, but you want to try and be mostly right most of the time.
Hey, and therefore labour becomes the biggest variable, isn't it? Relatively.
Yep. So now, and as a business advisor, so what sort of how did you end up making the move from these different businesses you're involved in to what you're doing now?
Look, I had 7 years running a architectural and delivery company, so design and build, and finished that up in around 2023. Didn't do anything for a couple of years, got incredibly bored, and did a little bit of work in the background for a few friends and their businesses, but largely thinking about things, and decided to get back into the workforce, and utilise some of my what I think is quite broad skills, and therefore, looked around and looked at a whole lot of business advisors, and came across Prime Strategies. What I guess made them stand out was that there's around about 35, 40 advisors between New Zealand and Australia, all a wide variety of people and different skills, and therefore within the realms of our Auckland group, if I wanted to know about a farming client or have some input about anyone, there was always somebody to go, hey, have you ever come across a plumber who's using this particular system? Do you recommend it, or should we, start looking at other options as they are trying to find scalability, whatever the question is. So I decided to do that and talk to them for a while, and have been doing that for only around about 7 months.
Okay.
So it's interesting.
So one of the things out of that was this checklist, which is a Prime Strategies thing. So I thought it'd be just, when I had to read through it, I thought there's just some really good questions to think about. And I think, we're definitely in yet another challenging time at the moment. So I've been doing a bit of rechecking, because it's been pretty tough over the last little bit, and you just think, have I pissed off all my customers or something? And so it's a good.
Are they hiding under rocks? What are they doing?
What's going on? And so I think it's a good opportunity just to recheck, because we're having to put resources in the business to keep it going, and wanting to build it, wanting to grow it. So I think it's important to make sure we're putting those resources into the right place. So going through a sort of a bit of a checklist like this is a good thing to do. So let's kick it off. So the first one was direction and strategy. And what it's suggesting here is having a clear written plan, and what we're supposed to do is for each of the businesses rate where you're at. So maybe just talk a little bit about each of those.
Sure.
I've written lots of business plans in the past, and currently I have to admit, I don't. I've got one in my head, but it's definitely not written down. So What would your advice be to somebody?
Look, I think...
I know, in case you even picked it up, I'm in for a free coaching session.
Hey, look, it'd be a pleasure, Nick, so not a problem. Love to go down to Onehunga again. I've got a parking ticket outside, by the way.
Oh, no.
But look, I think, one of the questions we always ask first of all is, why are you doing this? What's the ultimate outcome? Are you doing it because you want to have a sustainable income? Are you doing it because you want to sell the business? Are you doing it for other reasons? So the most important thing is, why are you doing this? And therefore, once you know the why, you know where do you want to be. And the important thing about where do you want to be is then you can go, I'm here, I want to be here, I need to chart a course and get the building blocks in place to achieve that. Once you have clarity around that, then you have a plan. And I think that's one of the most important things for any business. You can wake up after 2 years and go, well, what have I actually achieved? If you have a benchmark to compare it with, and you have a plan and you have accountability and you're aiming to achieve those goals to get to your ultimate goal, then it makes life a lot easier, and therefore you can get help and have an understanding of where you are. What we do generally with this type of thing, though, most of our clients, we sit down with every week, fortnight, month, depending on the scale of the company and what people want to do, to make sure that there's an equal accountability for, are you achieving your plan, and am I helping you enough? And therefore, are we moving in the right direction? So it's accountability on both parts.
And how often do you think people should look at what the plan is, or what the objective is? I'm presuming you're not doing it every month, so you're looking at it longer.
Absolutely, because the once you have a clear strategy and plan, then you have a budget. And looking at management accounting every month is quite critical, and therefore I have this plan, I establish a budget, and how does that compare every month in terms of how I'm performing? And that's quite critical. So every month.
I guess what I was aiming at the question is not so much checking your progress against it, but how often should you reset what the goal is?
Look, I think it depends on how you're performing and where you see, because I think with every plan, they change. You have a bunch of levers that you can pull, but at the end of the day, strategies change, plans change, goals change. The important part is at least to have clarity around what they were originally, and then you can compare it with where you're going as a result of the change. But you have to align yourself to that. Because as I'm sure you know, over your many years with this one, I mean, things change. Whether expectations change, the markets change, technology changes, customers change. So the most important thing is to address it regularly. So strategically, look, I think you look at the strategy every 6 months.
I like the Mike Tyson quote that everybody's got a plan until somebody punches you in the face. And we get punched in the face a lot over the last little while. So
absolutely, and it's been tough. And look, a lot of comments around that. I mean, I think the market has been very tough for most people. I think in terms of achieving that strategy, one of the really important things is to stay close to your customers and stay close to who you want to be your customers, and keep that activity happening in the background the whole time.
I described that as love your customers in an article I wrote recently.
Okay.
So it's about understanding what they're looking for and trying your absolute best to give them what they're wanting.
And keep in touch with them. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the next checkpoint was profitability. Why would people want to profit?
And look, some people don't. I mean, there are look, if you're a charity or something like that, you're doing it for a certain reason. I've had discussions with a guy who's really in the charitable market, but the reality is
I was being cynical, by the way.
No, look, but look, a charity has to make money. Any business, if you want to be sustainable, then you've got to be profitable, and
whether in a charity, whether it's a profit or a surplus, but ultimately you need to be generating more than it costs. Otherwise, you're not going to be there, and you're not going to achieve whatever objectives you've got. So,
look, and I think profitability. Measuring yourself and am I profitable is one thing, but also am I profitable enough for the amount of effort I'm putting into it is another kind of category. And if you're not, then you probably need help.
And it's certainly a discussion we often have with builders is the level of margin or markup they're putting on, that it's got to warrant the risk and the time and the capital you've got to invest in the business. You've got to make more than a decent wage out of it. You've got to be making a return on all of that effort and what's involved in being in business. And if you're not doing that,
you might as well not.
You might as well
get a salary. But I think, and you'd be surprised the number of SMEs that basically are possibly earning less than some of their employees, and they're taking all the risk. And so something's got to change in order for them to, achieve their objectives, but also make sure that the reward is greater than the risk.
And there's certainly a thing in the building industry that 10% is a fair markup, and I've often had arguments with architects about it, and ultimately it isn't.
No.
Yeah.
Look, I think to be in business, if you're not making 10 to 15% net profit, whatever that might be, then it makes it pretty tough to be in business. I mean, you got to look at the cost of capital and make sure that the risk associated with risking that capital provides you with enough of return.
Yeah, because if you're only making 4 or 5% net profit, then you might as well stick it in the bank.
Yeah.
So for the risk you're taking and the effort you've got to put into a business, then you want it to be a bigger number than that. And if you've got a 10% markup, well, that's only a 6% profit. So you're immediately doing no better than sticking the money in the bank. So you've got to be doing.
I mean, you do get leverage in a business, which makes it slightly different. But fundamentally, you're right. Yeah.
So the next one was cash flow. So what have we got to do from a cash flow point of view? How do we watch that?
Can you predict your cash flow? I mean, that's one of the most important things. How do I plan and how do I keep moving ahead with my strategy if I can't understand my cash flow? And so, a business operates in two ways. I mean, you have your operating profit and you have your cash flow. The two don't necessarily align. The number of businesses, including when I was growing a business myself, where, you seem to, from a profitability standpoint, be making a fortune. You go, where's the cash? And, generally as business grows, it gets tied up in debtors and it gets tied up in investing in capital, plant and equipment, or in your case, probably in terms of developing further IP. I mean, and that's a huge investment. So look, I mean, the most important thing, it comes back to your return on capital, but the fact is you need to be able to predict your cash flow. It depends on the business as to how far out you can predict that cash flow, which is one of the reasons, I guess, you're looking at a subscription model. One of the reasons that a continuity model is better because you can predict your cash flow forward, as opposed to I've got one-off projects, so it's a very lumpy cash flow.
And in the case of, say, builders, where they're making a margin on materials going through and subcontractors going through, there can be very big amounts of cash compared to the profit margin that's on it. Whereas for us, everything that comes in there, because we're a service business, our cost is the wages. So there's not a correlation at all between sort of what's going on, because we've got that wage cost no matter what. Whereas for a building company, the volume of materials, so the cash can be quite disproportionate to the profitability. So how does somebody keep an eye on that?
Hey, look, I mean, making sure that you do a cash flow. I mean, every business that I've been involved in now, a lot of them don't put together a cash flow and forecast out at least 6 months. Accuracy can be either out to 6 months, or it can only be 3 months. But if you're on your cash flow, you can only forecast 1-2 weeks. Well, then you've got a continuity problem. So look, I think you've got to put together a cash flow. Your cash flow should mirror in terms of your margins, your income and your outgoings to your P&L, so that you can look at the cash flow and go, is this representing my P&L margin, and just monitor that very carefully. But the business I'm working with now, look, we try and get them to do a cash flow every week. Right.
So in terms of a construction project, it would be looking at, typically they're probably 3 to 18 months in the residential space. So it would be, you've got an estimate up front. It's actually then start to time phase that estimate. So you've got an idea of what's going to be happening with the cash from that point of view. And then you're able to predict generally your expenses, if your labour's going up and down with it. So it's all built off having that good understanding of what your cost for that particular project's likely to be, and then adding a time element to it.
And that comes back to what you're doing, Nick. A good QS, and then aligning that costing against the actual, and making sure that it's trucking along, so you don't get to the very end of it and you go, I'm 20% short, as you mentioned earlier. So a valuable tool.
So that triggers a thought. So it's something that we've had in the back of our mind. So we've been primarily concentrating on the estimate, and it's something I've sort of seen as adding value, as being able to create this schedule out of it. But this discussion's making me think, I really need to prioritise that, because having the estimate is obviously a big part of it, but then being able to time phase it, I think is actually equally as important. So,
time phase it and have the actual cost filtering in there so that you can really look at where you're travelling, which I know.
I'd love to be able to do whether that's definitely not on the short-term horizon, but I think looking at coming up with a scheduling tool for being able to do the cash planning, I think is something that we do need to look at sooner rather than later.
Time is money too. So, one of the most important things is, as I'm sure you know from the construction industry, I mean, a project gets pushed out 3-6 months. It's a massive cost, not only in terms of labour, but, on-site equipment, the whole thing. Time is money,
And I guess the other element with debtors, with cash flow is managing your debtors, is making sure you've got a good handle and a good system around that. And
that's a matter of monitoring them carefully. My debtors pay me on time. We always look very early on at what are the terms and conditions of everyone you engage with, whether that's a customer or whether it's in terms of payment terms. Generally, what we try to do is, if you can, is to have very quick payment terms at the front end and payment 20 at the other, so that you're getting a cash flow advantage. Pay me in 7 days, but I pay you. So it's managing that cash flow in a way that is effective and that you're helping your cash flow as much as possible. But planning and forecasting that is essential.
It was interesting. I was at a builder's breakfast this week, and there was one of the things that came up is why do we give people 7 days to pay? Why isn't it? There's so many things you go and buy a car, you've got to pay right now. So why do we give terms? So it's definitely just challenging what you can do and whatever you can do to bring it forward is a good thing. And I guess in terms of paying, whatever you can do to push it out is a good thing, because then the cash is sitting in your business rather than somebody else's.
Look, I'm working with a plumber at the moment, and he takes his EFTPOS machine and basically has finished the job and signed off on the job, pay me now. I don't think that's unreasonable.
No. Good. Owner's time. So that's question number 4 on this checklist. A business is valuable if you're not working in the business. And over time, in order to exit businesses, you need to make sure you trade out of working in the business. Every trade wants to, most tradies, there's some tradies that love to actually be on site doing the physical work, but the reality is that most want to grow the business and they want to have somebody else running it, and they're running the business as opposed to what their bodies tell them. So look, I think that the more, if you want to scale your business up and move to a business that has the potential of selling, and you're developing and growing that business, then you've got to get out of being on the tools and operating in the business and make sure that you're running it. And a lot of people who grow businesses don't necessarily have the skill to do that, but they'll have a skill to do certain parts of it. And therefore, what we do is we come in and we play some of those other roles on small businesses where they've got that independence, they're managing the business day to day, but somebody's keeping check on them. Like any business, board's made up of, a number of people. An effective board never has 5-6 people that all have the same skill. They all come from different skill bases, so that they're always questioning and they're looking at logic of other people, and they're arriving at a good decision based on expertise from a lot of different factors around the business. Expertise. So totally relate to that. So I'm absolutely aware that my business is very dependent on me, and I've worked pretty hard. And as we've grown it, I've just sort of been forced to get away from operationally. So it was quite a big milestone for us where a job went through that I hadn't been involved with. That was 2 or 3 years ago.
How did you feel?
It was definitely, like, as it grew, every thing I dropped off, I was nervous about the quality of what we're doing dropping off, and was it going to lose customers because I wasn't being able to look after it personally? But at the end of the day, it's actually better for the customers in the long run. Because if I create a business that can sustain without me, if I get hit by a bus or whatever, the business isn't going to disappear. It's going to survive. We're probably not there yet, to be honest, but it's definitely a focus of mine, and part of it is around processes, part of it's around documenting the processes, part of it's being willing to delegate, part of it's been systemizing, so basically trying to build as much of my knowledge into the system, so it's not as dependent on me. And ultimately at the end of it, I'll either have something that's more valuable to sell, or I'll be able to carry on owning it, but I don't necessarily have to be tied to it every day.
Yeah.
So
I think, you're absolutely right. I mean, the critical part is the process rather than the person. And if you can develop a good business that has good processes, and whether you're there or not, the processes take place, the outcome's still the same, absolutely. And therefore it's not totally reliant on the person. The reality is with a lot of businesses and relationships with customers, et cetera, it does come down to the person, and therefore there's a real need to transition out of that.
Yeah, and certainly there is that personal contact, and if you can build up team members within your business that are able to build similar relationships to what you've got, then that sort of helps reduce the dependence on you. But I very much believe that the leader of the business does set the personality of the business. And
for sure.
That sort of
sets the culture. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, which sort of leads nicely into the next one, team and delegation, without even having read it.
Well, look, I mean, we've almost answered that one, haven't we? Because basically, what that's saying is that if you're, have you delegated, if you're not there, does the business continue to run smoothly? And if it doesn't, then, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you really want to develop a valuable business that you can stand back on, then you've got to have those processes. You've got to delegate to people and let them take responsibility. And I think that's hard, as you mentioned, it's hard to step away from that and go, do I have trust and confidence in my team? And if I'm not there, will my customers think something different? But if the processes are good and you've got the right culture and you've got the right standards and the right people, obviously, then things are going to work really well.
Yeah, and it's particularly with traditional QSing that it's very person dependent, and that's, I think, a feature of what we've built with YourQS is it's very systemized, so it doesn't really matter which one of our team does a job, you're going to get the same result out of it. So I think we're on the right track to getting there.
Certainly.
It's and any small business is always going to have dependencies. So whether it's a dependency on me or one of the other team, if we lose any one of our team, we've got a problem for a while we figure out how to backfill that place. And so that's a nature of any small business, and I think it's the nature of New Zealand, that being a relatively small country. The majority of businesses are our sort of size. So it's just something, a fact of life. You're never going to get away from it completely, but it's just making sure you've got stuff in place to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, completely.
Which again leads into the next one: systems and processes.
So look, we're answering these up front. So you can't delegate and you can't run smoothly if you have the right if you don't have the right processes and systems. So what we're saying here is that are they documented? If something goes wrong, somebody leaves, or you delegate to the rest of your team, is the system, the processes, the platform, is it all there and operating relatively automatically? And it is important to document processes, and I'm sure with what you're doing, I mean, effectively, the system around YourQS is really important to have processes in there to make sure the information is accurate, where you're pulling the information from. It has to happen automatically. The way you guys price, I presume that there's a good process in place so that it's consistent in terms of how you go about the business, and therefore the outcomes should be consistent and of that quality that you said.
Yeah, for us, it's sort of the next level back is basically getting documentation behind that. And so one of my developers actually discovered this thing called Scribe, which is a software system for recording. It basically makes it really easy to record the process steps. So we're actually putting a lot of work into documenting how we do things. So while the estimating process is quite automated and quite systemized because that's what our software does, the people using it, we're basically documenting and looking to do that and using the Scribe technology to do that. So, but it's a big investment. It's quite a significant amount of time. And then with our development team, we put a lot of work into how, because I guess, I don't know if you've had anything to do with software development, but it's very easy to end up with really complicated code that only the person that developed it is capable of looking after, and then you become very exposed to that one person. So, I know of a couple of companies, like some quite big companies that supply things like airport systems and stuff, where it actually comes down to one guy that wrote the system in the first place, and trying to get away from that. So we've put a lot of work into automation and documentation and stuff around our software code, and we're also carrying that across. So,
important. Look, you can't be reliant on one person. It's got to ultimately be documented. And that comes down to everything along, health and safety policy, human resources policy, general operating business policies. It's a lot of
paying creditors.
What are the rules? So effectively, somebody should be able to come into a business and they can sit down. Here's your role. This is the process that's involved, and I can go about performing that function even if I'm a temp or I come into the business because the process is very clear. Yeah. Now, ultimately,
that's the ideal.
That's the ideal. Yeah. It's not quite that simple.
And for a small business, it's very difficult to get to that point. If you're a big corporate, then maybe you can afford the money to do it. So it's about probably the 80-20 rule again, is making sure you get the main things down. And there's always a chunk of it that's going to rely on somebody saying, oh, we do it this way. Yeah. But if you can get the bulk of it there, then at least it's enough of a head start to get somebody going through it. And then from a business point of view, that is actually starting to create value in your business if you've got that in place.
I think also as businesses develop, the ideal situation is that you're bringing people through. When you're employing, you're bringing certain expertise, but the reality, if people have come through and developed with the business, then you've got some core competency right through how you operate there, and that's kind of quite critical and quite nice in an organisation. Not always possible. Yeah,
it's good. So the next one was numbers and reporting. So keeping track of the numbers?
Keeping track of the numbers.
Which I guess, because the whole discussion's been largely numbers, we've probably covered that quite a bit. So I guess we talked about a lot from a project point of view, but sort of stepping back, so whether you're running an architecture practice or a building company is, what sort of numbers should you be looking at that sort of business level? Yeah,
look, I think every business, you design a set of KPIs that are appropriate for that business. If you're an architectural firm, it's a charge out. It's not that indifferent from a lawyer or an accountant. Effectively, you're charging time.
Or QS, you're billing hours.
Or QS, and you're billing hours. So, that's about, what's my capacity, what's my utilization efficiency. So am I using my team the whole time? How are they performing versus the targets that I've got for each project, and making sure that you've got some very good quality variance reporting. So for KPIs, again, it depends on the type of business, but you normally design a bunch of KPIs, and generally, depending on the size and the availability of information, reporting every 2 weeks, and then at the end of each month is critical. When you start off, it's not as valuable as after you've been going for a period of time, because it's wonderful looking at a graph and going, in order to achieve my ultimate goals and in order to pull my levers, I need to be here, and you're seeing the graphs track in the right direction. So look,
it takes a while to build.
It takes a while to build that up, and also to make sure the information is accurate. The critical part is the information automated, and can I get access to it quickly? There's no point in having somebody sitting there calculating certain pieces of information. It takes some hours to do. So the systems have got to generate these KPIs quite quickly, and then you put them into a system that you're looking at. Generally, look at from a larger company, we always used to have a board report where a traffic light system. So basically, if it was red, then you jump on it and you're worried about it. If it was orange, it's something we need to keep our eyes on. If it was green, it's tracking in the right direction. You don't need to worry about it. So you're only concentrating on things, but you've got really good visibility to those business levers by virtue of a bunch of KPIs.
Yeah, so it then comes back to sort of understanding what your levers are and where you want to go with them, and so therefore tracking against it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
That's good. So sales and marketing is the next one on the list. So
and we touched upon this earlier on. In times like these, I think one of the things.
So the obvious thing, it's really easy when it's tough, is just to cut your marketing.
And look, absolutely, and that's what companies. They look at the cash flow and they go, look, this is an easy one. I'm going to cut my marketing budget. I think the reality is that that's the time to take market share. You don't need to necessarily spend the same amount, but you've got to be consistent and keep that marketing ticket over. And there are two things with marketing. I think one is, call to action. Am I targeting? Am I looking for sale and activity? And there's branding, and the two are quite separate things. The two can happen in unison. It's always good to have that background branding so that you're first in mind, but also it's really understanding who is my customer, can I target them and what can I do? And
is there anything I could do to sort of expedite a decision on something?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, look, I'm sure, Nick, with your builders, it's a matter of staying in touch with them. It's a matter of making sure you're aware of the projects they're working on and what they're trying to deliver. And therefore you've got that good market intelligence and you're staying in touch with them. Sometimes, as much as good marketing can work, sometimes it's Johnny on the spot. You can be there at the right time. But it's a matter of making sure you're developing that sales funnel and that you're working on the ones that are easy hits first and then developing the overall branding.
Yeah, so another old adage, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So from a marketing point of view, the more marketing I do, the more outcome I'm going to get from it. So there's definitely a connection there. And I think, and in tough times, if other people are cutting back on their marketing, then your marketing spend actually starts becoming more effective because there's not actually as much noise out there because other people are backing off.
Yeah, 100%. I think during tough times, it's a good time to take market share. And look,
even though it's maybe market share of mind, it may not necessarily be results because the results may not be there, but hopefully you're creating some presence that when things pick up, it'll pick up first for you ahead of the guys that aren't spending the money.
Completely agree. And look, it's about having a good mix. We're blessed with powerful social media these days, and there's a lot you can do. It's just a matter of getting looking at the economic times and making sure that mix of sales mediums is working well. I think during tougher times, you've got to have that mix of good social media, but at the same time, targeting. There's nothing better than getting in front of somebody and talking to them, I think.
Yeah, certainly we've tried a whole lot of things and, having a good day with the old adages, I know half of my marketing spend's wasted. I just don't know which half, it is, I've been in marketing a long time and it's very much that. But for us, what I do know that works is getting in front and talking to people. So, the relationship we've had with the different organisations like certified builders, master builders, turning up at conferences, talking to them, meeting them is great. Referrals is important for us. So being able to have referrals from other builders that have worked with us or architects that work with us, we get a lot of our sort of new leads and new inquiries through that. Yeah. Being able to leverage that and looking to try and encourage it, but solely relying on referrals is challenging because the network's sort of only so large, so you've got to keep doing sort of wider things as well.
And look, we met through BNI, and BNI is a wonderful opportunity there. And I think it's that throw a stone in the water, that impact. It spreads out, and there's opportunities to grow as a result of that. There's nothing like. And look, we've all got access to AI and targeting and getting lists and doing things like that. Nothing like, still sending you get very little response from an email, but actually doing something that's interesting to them and then basically follow up with a call. And ultimately, all you're trying to do is get in front of them
and get a relationship
and build a relationship. Absolutely.
And I think a lot of it's trying to provide value. So that's I guess what I'm doing with this is trying to provide value to people so that we're helping them be more successful in their businesses.
Thank you for that. It's great. Okay.
So I've heard about this concept, so stress and work-life balance.
What's that?
What's that?
Look, I think you can't be productive at work if you don't have a good sense of calm in your personal life. And look, we find with a lot of SMEs that, family relationships, spending time with your kids, doing good positive things away from work and being able to leave that behind ultimately affects the way that you work because you've got a clear head. So it's important to find that balance. There's nothing worse. And look, coming from somebody who was trying to grow businesses and probably spent 7 days a week half the time, and looking back now, if I had looked at it slightly differently, I probably would have operated slightly differently. But it's very important to commit to that personal time to get away from the business. As you know, as a sole trader, somebody's ringing you about some damn thing the whole time. So you've got to be aware and you've got to be available. But it's very important to feel in control of your personal life and your business life, and therefore finding that happy medium is really important.
And creating that space away from your everyday pressures and stresses. It doesn't really matter how you create that space or even how much of it you create, but you've got to create some.
Yeah, and you're right. It's got to be quality. And if you can create that quality away where you're not tied up in that, you'll find that your thinking when you're at work is probably more logical, and you can step back from it and look at it in a way that possibly you don't when you're so tied up in the business that you can't see the wood from the trees type of thing.
Yeah, and so you look back on your career and you would have done things differently, and I suspect that if you're able to create that space, you're not necessarily going to have achieved less by putting less time in, but I think you make the time that you put in more effective by creating that space. Whereas when we're in the middle of it, we're driving hard on our careers or driving hard on our objectives, it seems like the best thing to do is more work, whereas it may not actually be the case.
Look, I think one of many things I can bring from experience is failing at that. And you can look back and you go, if only I'd done it slightly differently. And I think, working with SMEs is about understanding, my experience was X, Y, Z, and I recommend that you do, that you play it differently. And that is just about, making sure you put time aside to do the important things. We all look back and I go, I should have spent more time with my kids. Well, you never get that back. So it's really important to spend that special time with family and friends, and notwithstanding that operating as an SME is still bloody hard work.
Yeah. And I think, the point there is that you obviously regret that time that you didn't spend with the kids. But to me, that's a quality decompressed time because it's away from the business, thinking about something different. Yeah. And the fact that you use that time up just driving in the business, it's sort of, you're losing out in two ways. You lost time with the kids, but you also lost time freshening yourself for your main battle. So
100%. It's a double whammy.
And obviously a lot of SMEs, the partners are involved in the business as well. So that sort of almost compounds on it because you go home and it's the same things at home. And so my wife's been involved in the business for the last 4 years now, and I don't like talking about business at home, and I get quite grumpy when she talks about business when we're going off to sleep. I'm trying to shut off from it, and so it's very easy it's bad enough for the owner of the business that it becomes all pervasive, but if both of you are in the business, it's even more so. So I think you've got to be more disciplined about making sure you create space around the business itself.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I've had experience with that, wife working in the business at the time, and I think when you're working in a business with a partner, you've got to make sure that the work you're doing is different and that you're doing two different things. You can come together for important decisions, but you've got to be doing something that doesn't overlap. It's not good for the relationship with the business and overlap. That's like having an expert in different functions within the business. You can come together for that, but it's very difficult to not take that home either way. But I recommend that people don't. If they can.
Yeah, so for me, I really enjoy cycling, and so is a big part of my decompressing is just, so I think the fitness and getting out in the air and so on helps, but just, blanking my mind for a few hours. And I've often solved problems. I can't stop thinking about stuff, but it's just having that space and not having to just be hard on the business the whole time is important for me. And the other thing we've done in our business is we've implemented a 9-day fortnight. And so we schedule a rostered day off for all of our staff.
Fantastic idea.
And I was a bit nervous about doing it. One of my mates had done it, and I wasn't. Being a business that sells hours, if we cut down our hours, surely it's going to affect the business. But I think we make up in the effectiveness for the 9 days that they are working for the 1 day that we're paying them for that they're not working. It's I guess I put my money where my mouth is.
Wonderful policy. Wonderful policy. Yeah.
So the last one we've got was future and succession, exit and succession.
Look, I think that one of the we touched on strategy initially, and we would always ask the question, the why and why am I doing this? Ultimately, as people progress, whether they're wanting to move on and buy another business or whether they're wanting to do something different or travel or whatever, most people ultimately want to extract the value for all those many, many years of hard work. So if all of the items on this checklist are done correctly, then the business is going to be worth more. There's going to be more value. They've extracted themselves on the business. They've got great systems and processes. Cash flow is consistent. The strategy is clear. An old friend of mine always said they've left a little salt on the bread, which I think is important. You've got to sell a dream to somebody who's coming in. But ultimately, it takes time to prepare a business for sale. Presentation can be 9/10 of the law if it's well presented, because you've been fundamentally doing all these wonderful things, KPIs and financial analysis and reporting and forecasting, processes all in place. The business will ultimately be worth more. So if you're planning on selling a business, you've got to start early and you've got to be ready, and you've got to make sure that somebody coming into the business, it's well prepared, and effectively they could come in generally and work not in the business but on the business.
I think the same principles apply whether you're not necessarily looking to sell it, but if you don't want to be tied to your business till the day you die or the day you close it, then the same principles apply, that if you can build it away from yourself. And so you might be quite happy carrying on owning it, and you might want to do a few days a week while you're traveling or whatever. If you can turn it into that sort of business, then great. But it's also that's a great business to be able to sell.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that's the desire of a lot of people as well. It's not necessarily to sell; it's to be able to step back from the business and travel and do things that they want to do. I think we have the same saying around selling houses, that always have your house ready for sale. None of us do it, of course, but fundamentally it's no different. Have your house ready for sale, have your business ready for sale. So that means it's well prepared, and you can sit back and basically you've still got to be there and aware, and you've got to make sure that the information's flowing and that you access to good quality information to help make decisions. But ultimately, it's ready to do either.
And also it means that you're in a good position. If something unplanned happens, you're in a better position to handle it. So whether it's illness or somebody comes along and makes a big offer on it, you're in a position to be able to handle it by being in that sort of constant state of readiness.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. No, we don't always do it, but I think building a business and following through a checklist like this is very simple to say, where are my weaknesses? Where are my strengths? What do I need to focus on? And ultimately, all of these things will help the business progress and do well, whatever the circumstances are or whatever you want as the outcome.
Yeah, it's not like addressing any one of these things is a bad thing. They're all going to help to improve whatever you're doing.
And for most businesses, they'll be doing some of them well, and some of them they won't be doing well. But ultimately, if you have all of these business snapshot of their services working well, then ultimately you're in a better position, whatever outcome you want or whatever circumstances. Yeah.
So that's great, Chris. I really apprecited the free consulting.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Are there any other burning issues or things that we haven't talked about that you want to raise?
No. Look, I think one of the things that's really important is, life's short. We've got to have fun. So some of following through with a lot of these business fundamentals is about making sure that life is less stressful and you can enjoy it, whether you can step away from it or whatever you're doing in the business. You mentioned the word culture, having the right people and culture, having a 9-day fortnight. All these things are incredibly important to making sure that people come to work each day and they're optimistic and they're ready to enthused. Simple things. We always used to. I used to cook breakfast for everyone on every second Friday morning, along with one of my colleagues. It seems like such a small thing, and yet what that did for staff on a second Friday, you could see people beaming as they went back to the shop floor. Just little pieces of being thankful for your people there and building that culture, having the right people. Very simple things can add a huge amount of value. And look, I'd recommend the 9-day fortnight, Nick. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, Chris.
Hey, thank you very much. Okay, cheers.
So I hope you enjoyed that and enjoyed watching me get some free consulting advice from Chris Stafford-Bush. So if you want some advice on your business and some guidance around how to address some of the things we talked about today, then feel free to get hold of Chris or one of the team at Prime Strategies. If you want a QS that really understands that sort of thing and is motivated to not only look at improving our business so that we can provide a better service to you, but looking to help you improve your business, then get in touch with Nick at YourQS. If you enjoyed this podcast, then follow us or subscribe or whatever it is you do on the platform that you're on. Thank you.